Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rosalie Olmsted. I am WiCyS Executive Assistant, and it is my honor and pleasure today to introduce WiCyS Strategic Partner, SentinelOne. But before we get started, I'd like to give a quick overview of the WiCyS organization. We often go by our acronym WiCyS, as in WiCyS, because that's exactly what we are, a cybersecurity sisterhood. WiCyS is a 501c3 nonprofit organization with a mission to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. Our community is made up of over 10,000 members in over 90 countries. We have over 70 professional affiliates and 270 student chapters around the world. We offer a variety of initiatives and programs, including our mentor-mentee program, security training scholarship, programs specifically for our veterans and military spouses, student chapters, our job board, and many more. We want to take a special thank you to our WiCyS strategic partners, specifically our Tier 1, which are Akamai, Amazon, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute, Cisco, Ford, Google, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Optum, Sandia National Laboratories, and our wonderful strategic partner who's hosting our webinar today, SentinelOne. I want to remind everybody to ask questions throughout the entire webinar. You have a question box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to drop them in and we'll get to them at the end during the Q&A session. And then lastly, if you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to the WiCyS newsletter. It is at wicys.org and it's in the upper right-hand corner. That'll keep you up to date on our other upcoming webinars going on and any events and programs that are launching in that month. And with that, I'm going to be turning it over to Nicole with SentinelOne, and I hope you all enjoy the webinar.
Thank you. We're excited to be here today. SentinelOne has been a strategic partner with WiCyS for over 4 years now, and we're excited to present to you this webinar, Working at the Intersection of AI and Cybersecurity. SentinelOne prides itself in being a strategic partner with WiCyS, and we are growing very fast. We have hypergrowth going on at SentinelOne, and we definitely stand for all the things that WiCyS stands for as far as bringing women into cybersecurity, as you can see by this slide. Some of our values are relentlessness and accountability, and those are things we take pride in when we are recruiting women to come to SentinelOne. So I'm going to turn it over to 3 awesome Sentinels who you will meet throughout this webinar today so they can talk to you a little bit about AI.
Thank you so much for that intro, Nicole. And I'll start by briefly introducing myself. My name is Adriana Corona. I'm Director of Product for AI and ML here at SentinelOne. And I've been here for over 1.5 years. But my career actually started not in product, but in cybersecurity. I studied computer science and I was a cybersecurity analyst for years before actually changing careers, becoming a UX researcher, and then a UX designer before ending up as a product person at a cybersecurity company. But the journey of my career kind of makes sense once you put all of the puzzle pieces together. This role is a perfect fit for me here at SentinelOne. And I'm really happy to work with such amazing coworkers. The next person I'll introduce is Betty. Betty, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Betty. I am a principal machine learning engineer here at SentinelOne, and I lead the AI science team in building the Purple AI product that we'll be talking about today. Before SentinelOne, this is my first job in cybersecurity. My career has always been in machine learning, in math, computer science, but I've kind of looked at machine learning in a lot of different domains, from biology, studying HIV treatments in my PhD, to doing search and ads, and to doing taking down pornography and terrorism on social media websites. But now here I am in cybersecurity. Manny?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Keerthi Nagothu. I'm a Field CISO at SentinelOne. As part of my role at SentinelOne, I work with different teams in competitive intelligence, thought leadership, and strategic deal support. I specialize in cybersecurity strategy, incident response, and risk management. Before joining SentinelOne, I was a security practitioner responsible for security operations and security program for a renewable energy company. I also have a passion for teaching. So, three of my courses on risk management are available on LinkedIn Learning, specifically on insider threat, designing tabletop, and designing controls. Happy to be here. All right. So before sharing our experiences working in AI and the intersection with cybersecurity, let's understand what is happening in the world of AI and how it is related to security. So, at a brief level, right, as businesses adopt AI, they are able to recognize that AI saves time going through petabytes of data and improve productivity. And at a high level, we need to understand what is AI because there are so many nuances involved. And I'm sure like Adriana and Betty are going to share more as we go through the presentation. But what is AI and what does it mean when someone says machine learning or generative AI at a brief level? So AI is the machine mimicking human mind using techniques, rules, or logic. Machine learning is a subset of AI, uses algorithms, statistical models to perform complex tasks without explicit instructions. So, ML is generally used for image and speech recognition, natural language processing, fraud detection. And generative AI models aim to generate new data that resembles human created data, including text, images, music. And LLMs, widely recognized in cybersecurity, are trained on large volumes of text and generate human-like text outputs. And these models enable us to capture complex language patterns. I just wanted to talk about this briefly so that we establish what is AI, what are the nuances involved in AI, so that as we move forward sharing our experiences, we are able to relate how we came together to work at the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. Next slide, please. Thank you. So before even delving into understanding how we came up or we discussed about the product, we need to understand how threat landscape is evolving in AI, because it's quite important as security practitioners to first understand what's externally happening to your organization and how threat actors are improving in their attacks, so that you also have products and technology that you are able to support your security teams in defending any kind of new attacks that are out in the market. So what you're seeing on the screen are only few examples related to LLMs or AI in general. But if you want to look more in detail to understand what kind of attacks are happening for AI technology, you have wide range of resources, including OWASP Top 10 LLM, MITRE ATT&CK, Atlas Framework. You also have OECD AI incident database. So they all list the incidents that involve AI. And starting with prompt injection. So this is, you might have heard this a bit. So some LLMs can be vulnerable to prompt injection attacks, and there could be a direct or an indirect prompt injection attack where a malicious user inputs cause the model to perform unexpected behavior. And the most common one that you might have heard about is AI powered business email compromise. So earlier, the signs of phishing in general were some message cues, such as spelling mistakes, logos, or out of context emails. What AI can do is align the context and increase the volume of emails targeting an organization. And one such example or attack that happened a couple of months back, where organization targeted German companies, and a malware or a ransomware attack was launched against that company. And the malware contained a PowerShell script, which activated an information stealer. And according to that proof point research, experts suspect that the PowerShell script was generated by LLMs because it was very thorough, it was very hyper specific, and grammatically perfect. So these are some of the attacks that we're seeing in the external landscape that we're seeing. Another one is AI created malware. So Black Mamba, it's a proof of concept malware that uses generative AI to generate polymorphic malware. Our Sentinel Labs team has written a great blog explaining in detail. So if you're interested, please do check it out. Our researchers at Sentinel Labs have also identified a ChatGPT powered malware actively attacking cloud platforms to steal credentials. It's called Predator AI. So that's another source that you can refer to. Another common type of attack that you might have heard is about deepfakes. So there have been instances in the past where celebrities or politicians' photos were used. So deepfakes have the potential to impact political landscapes, affect geopolitics by creating false narratives or spreading misinformation about public figures. And the last one that I want to touch base upon before sharing our experiences is data poisoning. So AI systems are built on data sets used to train it, and making small or subtle changes can steer AI in the wrong direction. And it's more than necessary that we understand these type of attacks, because only then, when you know about your environment, what's happening externally, can you protect your organization. So moving on to the next slide, where you see examples of AI based attacks. So these are the common ones that are publicly reported and available for you to check it out. So you might have heard the one where a finance employee was made to do a transaction of 25 million as the CEO and other executives were deepfaked. Or the most recent one where an executive was almost scammed by a deepfake impersonating Ferrari CEO. So luckily, the attack was thwarted as the executive asked a question to identify the deepfake person. So now that you understand what is shaping the industry, because it's quite important how the threat landscape is evolving, to understand, again, to repeat myself, to fortify your defenses. So this is how you relate AI evolution and how cybersecurity is interlinked. So next we delve into like nuances of developing the product.
And one point to really take home here is that SentinelOne, we're actually working on both fronts. So we're thinking about security for AI, including new emerging threats in AI that Manny talked through. So how the landscape is changing, how can we provide tools to strengthen your defenses against new Gen AI targeted attacks? So that's one aspect of what we do. But the other aspect is we always look for opportunities to use AI for improving the lives of security people, whether that be detections or new large language models or Gen AI techniques that help us improve the day-to-day life of a cybersecurity professional. So SentinelOne actually, for over a decade, from the very start of this company, differentiated itself through the use of AI for detections on endpoints. But now, with new emerging technologies, we immediately saw an opportunity to help improve the lives of cybersecurity analysts. And that's actually how we all met. So how the women on this webinar met is we all are involved with working on our product called Purple AI. Purple AI is an AI security analyst and is there to help you in your day-to-day work as an analyst. So during the rest of the talk, we're going to talk to you about how we actually work together in an interdisciplinary way to launch Purple AI, which we released globally in April. The first step was figuring out, are we making the right thing to actually improve the lives of security analysts? But in order to answer that question, the first fundamental question to ask is, how can we learn from customers and users what their day in the life is? I think I mentioned earlier on that I used to be a UX researcher and UX designer. So one of the fundamental principles about making sure you're focusing on the right problems is to actually investigate closely how people behave in their day-to-day work. So what we did was actually talk to security analysts. So we talked to our own SOC, our own experts, our customer SOCs to figure out, what is your day-to-day like and where are there pockets of opportunity for us to develop new innovations that would help you in your day-to-day work? So I have good news and I have bad news. The bad news is every part, every step, every phase of your day-to-day work is difficult and time-consuming. So something we found out overwhelmingly through this investigation is that there wasn't really any phase of the day that was like very easy to do with a lot of delight. Most of it was very stressful, caused burnout, and was difficult to do. So that's the bad news. The good news is because of these areas, pockets of opportunity that we discovered, we were able to hyper-focus our efforts on figuring out what are the problems that we could leverage new AI techniques to help security teams solve them automatically. So if you notice here, there seems to be one particular area in your day-to-day work that caused the most pain, was the most difficult, and the most time-consuming. That area was actually hunting and investigation. And that's why the very first launch of our product focused so heavily on improving the workflow that analysts go through when they have to do hunts or when they have to interrogate their logs for investigation purposes. So when we show you a demo of that first functionality that we launched with Purple, you'll notice how we heavily focused on making that faster and making that easier. But really, our objective is to help through the entire journey, right? So I mentioned I used to be a security analyst, and I remember what it felt like some days when there was more work to do than our team could actually accomplish. So it felt like trying to push this boulder up a hill like Sisyphus, where you're putting out fires, but at the same time, you might feel that you don't have enough resources to cover all your bases. And in fact, that's why we see many times organizations have to make that tough call. When you're thinking about risk management, you're basically having to decide which of these risks am I willing to tolerate because we don't have infinite resources, right? So if there's anything we can accomplish with our tool, what we want to do is help you push that boulder up the hill. So make that less effortful so that you can focus your day-to-day efforts on protecting your enterprises. So that's why we focused Purple AI's first launch on 3 major objectives. One of them we've already talked about, and it's helping you do hunting and investigation faster and easier. We have a lot of features that we launched specifically for that purpose. But throughout the process, something we discovered by talking to our customers is that now it seems very obvious in retrospect, but I think it's actually something we sometimes ignore when we're building security tools. And that's the now obvious fact that security is not the only job of a security person. So every security team member and team actually spent hours in their day after already doing all of the work to put out a security fire, spent hours trying to document the steps. So they document the steps because of reporting that they have to do, but also sometimes you have to involve other people in the investigation to either help fix the problem or help prevent it from happening again. So all of that is actually really effortful when you're a security person with expert security knowledge, but now you have to spend extra time trying to make your investigation and its results digestible by someone who's not an expert. So I'm sure security practitioners on this call have this experience of writing the emails, writing the reports, and writing the Slack messages, where you are the source of expertise, and you have to spend extra time trying to communicate to other people who you can't expect to be experts in cybersecurity. And then lastly, something that we launched right after our first GA was interactive support. So that's just a way to use Purple to answer your support questions, whether you're an IT administrator trying to figure out if there's an issue with an agent installation, instead of having to go off and research on your own in our help documentation. So all of these were our main objectives. And I mentioned we were really focused on learning from customers every step of the way. So part of that process was running a 3-month-long beta research program with 96 users. Beyond first discovering what are the real pain points of security analysts, our next step was, are we solving those? So having an interaction with customers in the run-up to actually releasing a product and incorporating that feedback loop is what helped us make sure and validate that we actually were improving that day-to-day life. So what we ended up with, and here you can see some of the results of our beta research, Purple AI's hunting and investigation workflows. Now you can just ask Purple something like, am I being targeted by Fin12 or some other threat actor? It really is as simple as asking that question. So our beta research participant reported it's 80% easier to do this with Purple than on their own without Purple. And it's 128% faster. Another data point I can share with you is a recent customer who told us that their investigation time, and they were actually still in POC, was reduced from hours to minutes. That's one of the data points we gathered. The other one was about our notebook feature. So we asked about the feature and whether it was useful. 97% of the respondents said it was useful, and in fact, 76% said it was very or extremely useful. This is because of the problem we talked about, where teams spend a lot of effort actually documenting investigations. With Purple Notebooks, it actually ends up being a self-documenting auditable artifact that is already in plain language. So I'm going to show you a live demo of what this means. But what you'll notice even in this image here is that the question you ask is in natural language. And even though the results will always be transparent and show you what query was run, what the results were, every step along the way, we spend extra time making sure we summarize those results in natural language. So by the time you have to share it with someone else, it actually becomes something very easy to understand without having expert knowledge. So let me just give you a very quick demo. And like I mentioned, the reason for us focusing so much on the notebook feature was just a recognition that throughout the entire journey of a security analyst, it is actually every step of the way that you have to translate your work into something that you can communicate to others, whether it's an email, a message, or a report. So let me just show you very quickly what we mean by Purple can just ask Purple. What does it mean to just ask Purple? So hopefully I can share this tab. And what you should see is the landing page for Purple AI, which is what we call our quick starts. These are meant to be inspiration. So they are curated by expert security people. And that means you can trust that these are fruitful avenues of investigation that we've collected from experts. But you can always ask whatever you want here. You don't have to use one of the quick starts. They're here to help guide your investigation and show you what's even possible with Purple. So we talked about hunting as one of the major challenges. Let's just talk through why our customers have reported it's so much faster and easier with Purple. So you'll notice I can ask, are there any indicators of this threat actor in my environment? I'm asking this in plain language. Now, the most important takeaway here is that even though I'm going to ask this in plain language, what it would have taken me, even as an expert, to answer this question would take a lot of knowledge. So notice that we got an answer in just a few seconds. But if you were actually trying to answer this yourself, I'm going to talk about the 3 pieces of knowledge that you would need to even start. First, you would need to know what are the indicators for UNC 1878. So find a list of up-to-date threat intelligence indicators that you would search for. The second thing you'd need to know is where in my logs would that appear? So what is the property in my data schema where I would search for this type of indicator? So notice here we already know that it's MDI process image name. You'll notice throughout the query, there are other places where we already automatically parsed for you what was the right property in the data log for EDR, etc. That's the second component. The third one, of course, is knowing how to write this query. So this is a pretty dramatic example, but you'd have to know how to put this together without making a typo and making sure it's well-formed and returns the results you're looking for. Now, it took me a lot longer to describe this than it does to actually run this whole process. But the reason this takes hours is that it actually requires you to do this for new threat actors, even if you're an expert, right? So there's no security analyst in the world who's going to memorize all of their data schemas or have up-to-date knowledge of every indicator. So what we see out in the field is most of the time, security teams will spend extra money, effort, and maintenance time scripting this. So basically siphoning some of the time your security team would spend actually triaging and hunting and investigating to write scripts to try to automate some of these steps, which is great, except this is just one example out of many examples of threat hunting and investigation. So if you do want to go that route of automating, which many advanced teams do, you'd have to figure out kind of bespoke automations for many of these other types of questions, like show me off-MFA fatigue attacks, etc. It is effortful. It requires a lot of expertise. But with Purple AI, you've already seen, you kind of just get a question answered for you, and you can continue your investigation without worrying about the intermediate steps of gathering all of the knowledge required. I also mentioned a little bit earlier that the notebook itself is kind of self-documenting. And what we mean by that is you ask a question and it's the question, the query, the response, and the follow-up suggestions are stored. But as you ask follow-up questions, you can actually append even more knowledge into your notebook. The beauty of this is what we've seen experts in teams do is sometimes they will anticipate a question that someone might ask them. So maybe I start my hunt looking for indicators of this MITRE tactic. So sure enough, I find a few. I want to point out a few things here. So one of them is, notice that there's a plain language summary here. Like we mentioned earlier, we saw that security teams would go through the trouble of figuring out the query, get the results, but then export it, run it through pivot tables, try to find patterns in the data to communicate that. Because we observed that, we anticipated that that would be useful, and now we provide that directly under your responses in natural language. So by the time you share this notebook, you don't have to go through that extra step of, let me try to create a summary of this long list of findings. The second thing I wanted to mention is you can go off script with Purple. So here I was asking about this particular tactic, but I noticed some of the command lines were kind of obscure, hard to understand. Normally what I might do if I didn't have a tool like Purple is ask a colleague, look through one of our manual playbooks, go to Google, right? But because I have Purple, I could actually just ask. I copied this and I asked Purple, what is this? So now I have a description of this type of command directly stored with the notebook. So by the time I anticipate someone's question, like I will get asked what this tactic specifically is, I ask it in advance with Purple so that when I share the notebook, it actually helps my team members get up to speed with the investigation without having to kind of handhold every communication step. And this is what we mean about, and the reason why notebooks have been so popular, they've been just a really useful tool for teams to use to collaborate amongst each other. So here I would just say, I already renamed this notebook, so I would just share it. And once I share it, anyone with view access to notebooks in this scope would get it, or I could copy the link and send it to them for them to see it. So all of those are ways that we're shortening threat hunting investigation and reporting. So going back to our Purple AI tool, the final step is, I mentioned that learning from customers is a part of every step, from the beginning ideas of the product all the way up to trying to release one. But it's important to always keep listening to customers and users. So we have in-product feedback. You may have noticed when I was giving you a demo, there's thumbs up, thumbs down, that we review the responses and the response quality. We also have live threat ops challenges. So if anyone here is interested in joining a live threat ops challenge, please just leave a comment in one of the Q&As. Those are actually capture the flag scenarios where we bring Purple AI and have teams compete against each other. We get suggestions from the field, and we have customer calls all the time to continually improve. And this is the response we normally get when we go off to trade shows and conferences. This was a European conference. When we do a demo of Purple, we usually take over our booth, and we take over all of the neighboring booths with excitement to see it. The interesting part is, one of the reasons it's been so popular is just that it's so real. So Purple is a tool that even if you've never used SentinelOne or are familiar with our log format or anything like that, we can set you up with a POC and you'll see the value from it with your own typical threat hunts immediately. So it's become a really popular tool, especially when we run these competitions that you see here, where we actually invite security analysts from the audience to compete against each other. One of them can use purple and one of them can't use purple. And so we learn a lot from these sessions as well. And I mentioned we have customer calls all the time. So this is from a recent customer call during their POC phase. So the POC phase is usually they're just trying purple for the first time. It runs for about 30 days. And we heard from them, even within that short time frame, that purple was already saving them time with investigation, reducing the time it took to answer their questions from 4 hours to about 20 minutes, which is exactly the reason why we built this tool. So we're really happy with this. And now I'm going to pass it on to Betty to talk about the other aspects about how do we actually make this well correctly.
Thank you. Okay, so and I see a lot of people have already questions about the details of it. I hope I can address some of them, and if not, feel free to ask more, and I'm happy to go into details as much as I can. Next slide. So in designing Purple AI, we follow these design principles, and as a machine data scientist, we are very much love to measure many of these principles with metrics. So the first is like looking at whether the product itself is being helpful. You actually solve the customer's problem. And Adriana already presented some of those metrics that we looked at for the helpful, to measure helpfulness. And then given that we know this is the problem, what we're trying to address for the customer, is the product actually delivering the correct response? And how fast is it doing it? Because this is an interactive assistant. So it's not, you have, the response time has to be relatively quick, within seconds. And then once you get all that, you're actually helping the customers. Is this safe? So for example, if we're working with government customers, then we need to make sure that we actually respect FedRAMP. But aside from that, nowadays you might also have heard when you're working with LLMs, people worry about whether the LLM is being respectful and having any biases and so forth. So we also keep an eye out for that. Transparency. ChatGPT has made everybody much more aware of what ML and AI does. I'm kind of actually quite happy about that. Now I can actually talk to family and they know what I'm actually doing day to day. But everybody still kind of takes the memo of like, trust but verify. So we found that users would very much enjoy seeing that, like not just us showing them what the query returns, but what is the actual query we generated. Adaptive. So Adriana already showed how like we constantly seek user feedback from the very beginning before we even start building the product, to during the process with beta customers, and even after we launch. And we continue trying to improve our model and learn more with the user feedback. And then comprehensive. Right now we found that like Purple AI has gotten really positive feedback, and we've been really amazed by that. And so we're starting to integrate Purple AI into more and more products within SentinelOne, and it's kind of becoming like a central entry point to a lot of SentinelOne products. Next slide. Okay, this is a pretty deep slide. So from a 10,000 feet view of what Purple AI does. So when a user asks Purple a question, it goes to the agent framework, which is first it does uses a bunch of different what we call guardrails to make sure that you're not trying to abuse the system, or and some guardrails about like what the system is actually capable of doing. And these are, I think someone was asking it, so some of these guardrails are traditional ML models. There's a couple of them that are LLMs, but mostly traditional ML models. And some of them are just plain statistics and heuristics. So now we first decide, for example, is this a Q&A support question? Or is this the user asking us to search to generate a query? So once you know that, then we can go to the knowledge base to actually ask questions. So somebody was asking whether we use RAG. Yes, we do. This is a knowledge base. We go to the knowledge base to figure out like, okay, what are some, if this is a Q&A question, what kind of support knowledge would have the information we need? Or if this is a question about a threat actor, we need to go look up information about the latest threat actors. And so look at rich database, and we might even go out to external and internal knowledge sources to get even more enrichment. After that, the agent framework gets a relative pieces of information, puts it into the prompt, and gives it to an LLM. We have the ability to actually use a variety of different LLMs, and depending on particular function that we're trying to solve, whether it's a Q&A, whether it's summarization, whether it's power queries, we'll use different LLMs, whichever one works the best. And as whoever you have actually been working with LLMs, you will realize they're constantly improving. It's ridiculous trying to keep up with them. So we keep on trying to do benchmarks and see which one is best for this remote, and we kind of swap them in and out, and constantly trying to improve our product. So in the case of a power query, if you generate a power query, we figure the relevant pieces, we send to help us generate the power query. Now we send it to Singular Data Lake, which is an existing SentinelOne product, to bring back the pieces of data. Now this query data table could be thousands and thousands of rows. This is way too big for us now to summarize by just stuffing it and sending it to an LLM. So this is where then the agent framework takes it and gives it to statistical models to summarize the data, so forth already, like identify outliers, identify summary statistics, and so forth. Or based on the question, what are some of the more interesting statistics might be useful. Out of that, it creates another prompt to send it yet to another different LLM to summarize this large data table into a smaller, nice little chunk of summary that would then go into your notebook. Okay, so again, what is RAG? So retrieval augmented generation. If you work with LLMs, you would work with this architecture quite often. So LLMs like ChatGPTs are trained on huge amounts of unlabeled data, and they're great at completing sentences, completing code, and so forth, whether you know the topic or not. And in the case of cybersecurity, well, a lot of times they don't know the topic because it keeps changing, and LLMs are only trained up to like a certain month, so they get outdated, the information. And when they don't, but the thing is, they train on on completing sentences, unlabeled data so much that they can even make it very convincing in their answer. Even when they don't know the topic, they can BS their way like nobody can. And when they do that, we call it hallucination. RAG architecture is one way one method to reduce hallucinations by grounding this LM response with relevant information. So information that from sources that we create and we trust. This also lets us actually inject new information about the latest threat actors that might not have been available when the LM was first trained. But it's very important that this information is accurate because garbage in, garbage out. So you can see here, like briefly in this diagram, what happens that, so from a question, we would, in order to figure out which piece of information to pull up, we represent every single piece of the information, breaks it down to chunks, and then create an embedding vector, all of them. An embedding vector is essentially a vector of maybe 1,024 different floats, and we store all that into a database. So when a new question comes in, we can quickly look up in that index and retrieve the relevant snippets and then pull them together to give to the LLM to generate a power query, generate a summary, and so forth. Next slide. So how do you choose an embedding vector, and how do embedding algorithm, and how do you choose relevant snippets? So for question answering, the challenge here is that a lot of these documents are actually really, really long. Like one might ask, like, well, if they're telling support documents, so forth, why can't we just train the LM on it? These documents, why can't we just include the whole knowledge source every single time we ask the LM a question and let it figure that out? But these documents are so long, you can't really just put it all into LM context. In an LM window, there is a limit on the size of the LM window, and it also just costs a lot to constantly send that back and forth. So what we do is that we split those documents into smaller chunks. The chunk has to be enough to capture the relevant information, but small and keep the context, but still not too big. It has to be small enough to fit into the LM input window size. The other challenge we have here is that when you have different knowledge sources, they can have different writing styles. And how do we then have the embedding algorithm make it so that, for example, if you can imagine like somebody writing a very legal document about what a legal document on LLM, giving a definition versus the definition of LLM in a book about, in a dummies book for LLM. How do you make sure that the two embedding factors generated are still the same embedding factor or very close together, because they are actually about the same thing? So that's my question answering. For Power Query translation, the kind of, we're not dealing with long documents. The knowledge artifacts we deal with here is actually retrieving to correct schema columns and retrieving the relevant examples of natural language to Power Query examples. This might be an old example. We don't have the latest example, the latest slide. What you guys have seen in the demo already, some examples of the examples. I wanted to show you guys like some of the examples of English to Power Query translation. So you already saw some of it actually in the demo that Adriana gave. But basically, these examples kind of capture how, for example, if it's a question like, are there unsigned DLLs loaded from a temporary folder? We would include like which columns you would actually be looking at this information from, and also which fields you would want to look into to get this information to filter on, and then also which columns would bring useful information. So for example, like things about source process information or the source signer, the module path. None of this is actually mentioned in the English text, but the examples we give here we have expert knowledge telling us that those are useful columns for the SOC analyst, and we would be captured in the English to Power Query examples that we use in the RAG system.
Great. And I'm sure we're going to have loads of Q&A questions for you. I'm seeing a few of them already coming in, Betty, so get ready.
Okay, cool.
And so I'll move on to the third phase, which is just very briefly talking about taking it to market. So we talked about how we learn from customers along the way. And so the first part of deciding how to position Purple AI in the market was actually refocusing again on the customer needs we discovered through all of those interactions. So we talked about long alert queues, more work than any team can do. It's really hard to even set up systems to protect your enterprise. There's not enough time to do proactive threat hunting for hours. There's a talent shortage. So all of these are things that we learned early on when we were envisioning what kind of product would help a security team. So the next step was also, how do you actually create messaging around this so that it's understandable by the security analysts who would benefit from using this? So you'll notice if you go to our public website that a lot of the messaging that we provide is precisely about the features that we mentioned here that our customers said are really valuable. Simplifying complex operations, up-leveling your entire security team, etc. So I'm not on our marketing team. Our wonderful director of product marketing, Rachel Park, worked tirelessly to get our messaging right and then amplify it across many different avenues. And part of it that you may have seen as we scrolled through this website was just always putting forth how we actually validated our goals. So making sure that we spoke to our beta research participant and actually got customer feedback that said, yes, you are improving threat hunting investigation. That was our core mission for our first launch. And we talked a little bit about the mortal versus machine threat ops challenges, but we've learned so much from these that we're actually starting to expand the use of them. So we're taking them to more trade shows. We're setting up remote webinar style threat ops challenges and learning so much from customers. One of the most important insights we've gotten is usually in the competition, we have at least one threat hunting Power Query expert who is not allowed to use Purple. Many times they will quote unquote lose the capture the flag competition to someone who's totally new. So we had one case where an IT manager beat out like a seasoned threat hunting expert. But so we always get the question, and maybe someone's already asked it here, oh, okay, so is Purple AI made for a junior analyst, or is Purple AI made for a senior analyst, or what is it? The truth is that, so we intentionally asked the expert not to use purple because we knew the benefits you get from having that collection of knowledge done for you. But once you give purple, you give this threat hunting expert access to purple, there's this aha moment where they immediately see why it's faster with purple. And we already talked about this through the demo, right? So in this case, we had the expert who came in 7th without the tool. Then we gave him purple and he said, aha, I see why these AI competitors beat me. It's because the AI is really fast at knowing, using the knowledge that Betty talked about, knowing what are the fields to include the data schema, and versus having to manually look it up, which even experts have to do, right? So we've learned a lot from these scenarios that we put together as a fun competition. So now I'll pass it on back to Manny to talk about a holistic approach.
Sure. And thank you, Adriana, Betty, for a great presentation and sharing your experiences. So as part of my role as Field CISO, I get to interact with a lot of industry leaders, security practitioners, security leaders, CIOs. And there is a common theme that occurs with regards to AI. And this is something I have inculcated in my AI learning as well. So firstly, I would like to highlight the importance of AI learning across the organization. So moving on to like next slide, Adriana, if you can move. Yeah. So more specifically, the strategic direction and how it is beneficial for security teams. So understanding the benefits AI can bring to the organization as AI technology evolves and the business adoption increases, it is necessary that security leaders be strategic about adapting and learning the nuances of the technology. So this could start with getting acquainted with the changes in the market, how AI is being used by the offense by threat actors, as discussed earlier in the start of the presentation, and also critically investing in the people and process technology to defend against the evolving threats. Security leaders would be at the forefront to guide the leaders in business in using the technology in the organization in a secure and safe way, because every type of LLM, whether it is publicly facing LLM or a private LLM, or off the shelf or an application, can cause different levels of risk to the organization. And without the awareness of this, it would be difficult for security leaders to help with risk conversations and aid in decision making for the business. From a process and a people perspective, facilitating the adoption of AI and becoming an enabler for business, a security leader should create the relevant AI acceptable use policies. And if you're one of the employees of the organization, you might have seen like an AI acceptable use policy or a procedure or a guideline, which can give direction to the employees as well as to the business. And security leaders should provide relevant training to the employee on using the AI and taking the role of an enabler. And most importantly, what I would like to highlight is the immense opportunity that generative AI presents to the security leaders, as you have seen earlier in the product Purple AI, in transforming their security operations. Because as a SOC analyst, there are a number of challenges that SOC teams face on a day-to-day basis, whether it is reducing the mean time to detect or performance or scale. And one of the common challenges is addressing the backlog of threat hunting investigations. As Adriana and Betty have showed, like generative AI has this immense potential with summarizing and like providing insights into petabytes of data, which is otherwise performed by SOC teams right now manually. So Gen AI should be leveraged with strategic direction from the leadership as well as security leaders and practitioners, learning the skills required for AI so that they can use them in their day-to-day operations. So now that we have understood like how learning of AI is helpful at an enterprise level, moving on to the next slide, which is AI learning at an individual level. So now that you understand, like I also, one of the things that I do is also thought leadership. And as part of that, there's this continuous learning that I go through as well. And I see security practitioners go through as well. So I just wanted to like share like how individuals or security practitioners, because I did see a question on like how to keep up themselves ahead and contribute to the betterment of the organization and security. So there are many avenues where AI and cybersecurity is being discussed. And for example, SentinelOne discusses the use of AI in our blogs, in our research, in our webinars like these, conference talks. So we also talk about like our AI engines, Purple AI, how machine learning is being leveraged by us, available everything on our company website. And as you see on the slide, there is ongoing research published on through the industry white papers, research papers, studies where they give insight into how AI is transforming security and how AI can be leveraged by security practitioners. And we also have government agencies and professional bodies discussing about AI use. One such resource is NEST AI RMF, risk management AI risk management framework. We also have CISA discussing about it. Another source that I was quoting you earlier was OWASP Top 10 LLM, explaining about the different types of attacks. Another source is OECD, where they do track like AI development as well as AI incidents across the world. MITRE at Large framework is another resource, and we also have professional bodies talking about AI in general. So, what helps in this whole process is that when you come to or come interact with different sources of information, you would be able to gain knowledge over a period of time, and it helps to establish that knowledge depth within the organization where you can actually use AI for the betterment. And also interacting regularly with practitioners. For example, like through this webinar, Adriana, Betty, and me shared our experiences. So having that interaction, having that learning ongoing can build your knowledge base, because as most of the business statistics suggest, AI is going to be there and is going to be adopted into businesses more than ever in the next coming years. So that is the last part of it. And for any other questions, please feel free to connect with all of us on social media or drop a question on the chat.
And if you scan this QR code, you won't be surprised to realize it takes you to our open positions at SentinelOne, where we want to hire more and more women.
It helps to unmute yourself. Thank you all so much. This was an absolutely spectacular webinar. We have a lot of questions, so I would love to get through them, or at least most of them. Like they said, please feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I think that's one of the best ways to reach out to our presenters. And I can go on. For prospective clients or security teams working in the payment industry, how do you ensure that Purple AI does not store users' sensitive data information?
That's a great question. And data privacy in general is one of the top concerns we hear from customers. So something to know, we take data privacy very seriously. So we have controls in place for it. But even if we refer back to Betty's description of our RAG architecture, you may have noticed that the data lake component of our architecture is separate from our agent. It's separate from the language models. That's a very intentional architectural decision. So it may look seamless when you're interacting with Purple and I ask a question and the answer is my log results. It makes it seem like Purple itself or the large language model we use throughout the process has knowledge of your data, but it does not. So your data is stored in your data lake. So your log of events is stored in the Singularity data lake, just like it was before Purple existed. The layer of Purple is actually doing the translation of your intent in natural language into a Power Query. It's not, Purple itself is not looking at your data. So that's one nuance that I think sometimes it's missed, but it was a very, very deliberate decision in the architecture. The second thing to know is we have a swappable large language model, foundation model component of the architecture. We have contractual legal agreements with any of those swappable models that they're not allowed to restore, retain, or train on any of the inputs we provide. So we also have that guardrail against any large language model somehow using something for training.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have had a lot of questions specifically about participating in your live challenges. Where would you direct our viewers to go to get more information about that?
So the best thing to do is to show interest in our Purple AI survey. So let me just send a quick link through our chat here, or maybe send it to you to send.
If you put it in the chat, I'll make it an announcement and I can make sure everybody can view it.
Okay. And then the second thing is to connect with us on LinkedIn. So just reach out so we can make sure to connect with you when there's an upcoming remote ThreatOps. We also have a lot of ThreatOps challenges at events. So if you find yourself at another WiCyS event, or you find yourself at RSA or Black Hat, we will surely be there and have live events so that you can even come up and compete in one of those challenges up on stage.
Amazing. And then we have a couple questions about people wanting to get into cybersecurity. I would love your opinions on what do you think is a great starting point? What specific tools and technologies would make someone stand out, and particularly at SentinelOne?
I can take a first stab, and then maybe each of us, because we're in different disciplines, right? So I'm in the product role. One thing that I think is unique for all of our roles is that we have principles, right? So SentinelOne believes in accountability. And so there's a list of these also in our jobs website. So when we actually speak to candidates, whether we're talking to someone at a booth or someone applied through our posts online or in LinkedIn, one of the considerations is, do you believe the same, do you have the same values that SentinelOne has? So I would say starting there, even before any of the other, like, does my resume meet the requirements, is really critical. What about you, Betty?
Oh, Betty, you were muted.
So for science, as much actually, this is my first job in cybersecurity. So definitely SentinelOne is open to people like that. And in fact, most of the science team that I lead are people coming in with a lot of ML background, but zero to little cybersecurity knowledge. And our VP recognizes that. And that's one thing that he's trying to make sure that we are giving us training opportunities to pick up on that aspect of our background. That we bring to the table other skill sets. So I think that's one way to get in. It's just that you might have other skill set that's useful to the company, and that would help you bridge the gap. Also, if you're coming straight from school, we do have internship programs, so that can also help a lot. I know my team is about to host an intern in an upcoming quarter. So.
Yeah, just want to give a shout out to Nicole and the team. So we are strategic partners with WiCyS, and we did a conference this year where we were talking about how SentinelOne is, and different opportunities for people to interact with the people who are currently working at SentinelOne. So definitely, like, internships is one of them, and yes, through WiCyS we would be doing more webinars and events, and we would give opportunities to talk and speak with us.
Amazing. Thank you. Any other feedback? Then we're going to go to our next one. What do you think are the major differences between Purple AI and Charlotte AI from CrowdStrike?
I can start, I think, by just talking about things we've heard from customers. So we do sometimes have a customer overlap because we have other product lines at SentinelOne. Like, we have a SIM, for example, our AI SIM, and we have cloud native security offerings, etc. So one thing we have heard is that our tool is something they can use right away. So I would just urge you to ask for a demo of Charlotte and ask for a demo of Purple AI and try both of them hands-on. I think that's the best way to actually understand how they differ in their response quality and responsiveness. So that's one thing I'd say. The other thing is, we were very deliberate in our focus on threat hunting and investigation, which is why we have so many examples and deep hunting, even follow-up questions to help you interrogate your logs. That's not necessarily true of other quote-unquote co-pilots or tools like Charlotte AI in the market. And Manny, I think you've also done a lot more exploration there if you have more insights.
I think that's a perfect answer, Adriana.
And then we're seeing a lot of job questions. And we'll come back to those. But this is an amazing tool. I'm early in my career, and it seems like this tool would be great to learn and grow as someone seeking an analyst role. Is Purple AI available to someone like myself?
Absolutely. So I think we mentioned it in some of our conversations about the POCs and the competitions we have, but we do see that Purple AI has been used by teams to uplevel each other's knowledge. So an expert analyst maybe creating a notebook and sharing it with someone to be like, these are the steps I would have gone through. But in the absence of that collaboration style, you can also ask Purple for security knowledge. So we've seen users even ask Purple directly something like, hey, what should I put on a dashboard that I'm making for my CISO, right? And then because it's about cybersecurity knowledge, you can kind of have a tool that helps guide you through decision making in that way. So I would say it is really useful for someone just starting in their career. I think the hurdle is to use Purple AI, you should be a SentinelOne customer with endpoint logs in your data lake. So that is like one of the barriers to being able to use the tool is actually having endpoint telemetry to start using as a hunting tool.
Wonderful. We are at time. There are a couple more questions, but I did throw in the chat. So if you want to click on that link really quick, I did an announcement with the career page for SentinelOne because I saw some comments that the QR code wasn't working. So that is in there. So I would suggest grabbing those links really quick. I want to take a moment to say thank you to our incredible presenters, Adriana, Betty, Manny. You guys did amazing. We very much appreciate your time today, and we very much appreciate the knowledge you've bestowed on us about Purple AI. And I hope everyone has an incredible rest of their day. And with that, have a great day. Bye, guys.
Thank you.